Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the Brazosport Vineyard Church. We're continuing. This is really kind of a transition message from the Injustice League to the next series, and you'll kind of hear what that's going to be about. The subtitle here is The Joy in the Not Yet. And this idea or understanding that we are a people of joy, but we're in a condition, a situation that is not necessarily joyous. And last week, we talked some about this, the idea of how injustice so drastically affects and transforms and changes who we are as a person. That the world looks at injustice and uses it as smart or wise. It's the protection that you need, and it is the way of the world to do business with people and events. And what we find is that our views, because it's so much a part of our psyche, our being, and the way that we actually process, that it affects our views of God, it affects our views of people, even of ourselves. All of these things are rooted in, I'm going to change the word from injustice to performance. How well did you perform this week? How well has God performed this week? Or your spouse, or your boss, or the people who work for you? How well have they performed? You see, that's just another way of looking at justice and injustice. Performance produces what is considered excellence, mediocrity, or something that is poor. And so these feelings are powerful. They will shape the way that we see certain people, the way that we see ourselves, the way that we understand gifting, or the way that we see intelligence. And we justify this because we can tell a lot about a person by the way they behave, can't we? We can tell a lot about a person by the way they conduct themselves morally, perhaps. You can decide who you're going to trust, who you're not going to trust, who you're going to hang out with, who you're not going to hang out with. And we can build a case that that is indeed wise. Injustice is a grading system, and everything is touched by it. We were looking at Job and this understanding of mankind, understanding how we process, how we use this for wisdom, how we use it to make good decisions, and how we use it to take care of opportunities. Job was in that very place, and Satan knew this is how mankind works. You see, mankind does not work very well in a system where God trumps our justice. Where God is greater than any justice that we can discern. That the greatest, most infallible injustice and justice that I can produce, God is greater than that. He is more just than that. And so when Job was faced with this from Satan, it was Satan's bet that in this situation where there was enough injustice that Job would indeed diminish the purpose, the place, the power, and the position of God himself. That somehow it must render God less than what Job had hoped he was. And in the end, Job was not willing to diminish God. And Job was willing to accept that although he had a justice and his justice was right, somehow God's was righter. And that's the difference between God and perfect people. So Job came up with this understanding that he didn't have to reconcile that he was in this environment where it seemed unjust to him, but he serves a just God. So he had to accept the fact that he is just and God is more just. And there is a great tension and there is discomfort. And this idea that performance equals payback that is good just was not for him to have. His health was gone. His family was gone. His friends had turned on him. And I want to challenge you, if you haven't read the book of Job, if you go through, just go through the book of Job and just peruse and pick out lines that you like. Pick out lines in there that you say, oh, that is good. Oh, that's true. Oh, that is the gospel. Look through. You will find them throughout the book of Job. And every time you look at it, it will be one of Job's friends. That's who it is. That's how easy it is to have good lines, but they were actually defending the idea that Job, you must be guilty because God blesses those who are not guilty. And clearly, you are not a blessed man. You are a cursed man. You see, that was their bet. They could look at the evidence of his life and they could see whether he was guilty or whether he was innocent. Do you know that's still a system that we use today?
That's right.
That system is still there. It's still in place. We grade on curves here and there, but at the end of the day, successful people, there's something right about them in most of our thinking. So the moment when Jesus steps onto the scene, you see, the moment is no longer powered by the moment. It's not even powered by life. And the power and the importance of the gospel is revealed in this idea that injustice in the moment does not rule the moment any longer. When Jesus was in the Garden of Gethsemane, he was enduring the moment as unjust as it was for a greater justice. We're singing about that today. He endured that moment because he knew that real justice was on the other side of this moment. Do you believe that about your life? That if you can endure, if you can thrive, if you can find the joy of the Father, if you can find peace of the Father in an unjust moment, do you believe that the other side of that moment is real justice? Because that's what Jesus revealed in his life. That's what he walked out. He walked out this idea that justice was being produced and coming, and that we were pursuing justice by pursuing a life with the Father. The ability of God's people to thrive in injustice is a critical place of maturity for every believer. The heart of injustice, it requires rules. It requires the law. Without the law, you won't have injustice. And we identify with those things. Not too long ago, I had a crab meat omelet. Melinda looked at it. She took a little bite, and here's what she said. That just ain't right. Crab just does not belong in an omelet. I like crab in omelets. But you see, that wasn't right. And when it's not right, it's not right. It's an injustice. I remember years ago when I was a kid, and we had really no money, and we had these neighbors who, they went and got this, prime sirloin and had it chopped up for hamburger. And my mother could not sleep at night knowing that they had done that with this great meat. Then chopped it into hamburger, because that ain't right. You see, that's what injustice looks like. You look at it on a small scale, and you can see that it's everywhere. What you're not comfortable with, what ain't right. Why are you parking in front of the pump when everybody needs a pump when you didn't even need gas? You could have parked up at the front. So Jesus enters this world, a world that's full of rules, and he comes first to the people of God, the people with God rules, and then he comes with this new way of being human that has nothing to do with the rules. And mankind didn't know what to do with it. They heard him speak with authority they could not figure out. He didn't seem to be a rules guy. When the woman was caught in adultery, she was supposed to be stoned to death. What did he say? Let the one who does not have sin, why don't you throw the first stone? You see, when somebody is listening to the Father, they will have the right answer. You hear how that was the right answer? You hear how Jesus navigated the legal system, the laws. He navigated justice and injustice wonderfully in that moment. And he always did. It was why I think the Pharisees probably thought, this guy is slick. You know, he's slick. He's like a good salesman. He's slick. But Jesus was just listening to the Father. You see, the Scripture gives us this whole new way of seeing conflict and failure, disappointment, betrayal, how we see villains and enemies, and what I wanted to add to this, how we see life and death. How we see our life, quality of life, opportunity of life, how I should live my life, what I should think of death. Should I be afraid of death? And then he begins with the Sermon on the Mount, and he begins to roll out this whole new way of being human as a person of God. And we talked about this, to love your enemies, pray for those who make your life miserable, stop arguing, stop complaining, don't use any more coarse language, don't resist an evil person, don't worry, don't be afraid, love your enemies, pray for those, that's a repeat. And turn the other cheek, all those things. I had several conversations this week about some of those things. How you really can't, that's not really possible. How do you raise your child if you can't see when they're wrong? How do you do that? How do we do any of this? How do we make any of this work? You see, we can either make these rules and try to live by them, which just reintroduces even more difficult rules. We have to figure out how to actually do this. And these people are right. We can't do this. We can't make this work. Do you resist Hitler? Who do you resist? How does it work in a place where God has replaced the rules with love and the pursuit of all humanity? How does it work? And we see this in Matthew 19 where Jesus says, oh, by the way, it's going to be impossible to do that. Except if you're with me. You see, I have given you the impossible to do. I have introduced you into my world, into who I am, into my life, and I've invited you into that. And what I'm saying is, I will empower you to do it. So this new life is not powered by guidelines and rules. It's not set up so that we can condemn and we can accept. It's not set up so that we can do pass-fail on people. It is set up so that we are forever connected to our Father in heaven. And it's through Him and only through Him that you can succeed at being the person of God in humanity. I want you to think about that. Do you really think God could give you another set of rules and say, now go be God Himself in humanity? Go pull that off. Do you really think we could do that with just a few more rules? Or do you think there's more substance to it? There's more to it than that. God is saying to be a believer, to be a Christian, to be a follower of God, to be a kingdom person, you will have to be forever connected with me all the time. Or you're just going to be a legalistic, disappointed Christian. That's what you'll be. You'll be a frustrated, legalistic Christian who has more questions than you have answers. And when the world looks at you for any kind of light, what they will see is your doubt, they will see your confusion, and they will not see the light that they're looking for. But if we choose to do something very crazy, very radical, and we choose to intentionally connect my life every moment, this moment right now, in the good times, in the bad times, in the struggles, when things are easy, when I disappoint myself, when I disappoint others, when we connect all those moments, every one of them, to God, we allow his voice to influence us in that moment, there will be a different outcome in that moment. And where you feel like your anger and your rage have no other choice but to act out, you will find God has a different answer for you. When you find that there's nothing else to do but to argue back and you ask God, he will have a different answer for you. You see, you don't have to say, I will never argue again. You don't have to say that. All you have to say is, I will choose to connect with God in every circumstance that has arguing. That's what I will do. And I will allow God to play in that story. We can see that Jesus lived a life accurately portraying the Father. He lit up everything around him. He loved sinners. The stone he threw at the lady was, go and sin no more. Or how about saying it like this? You're free to go. Sin no more. Do you really think she's never going to sin again? Do you really think that that's how that's going to go? Or do you think that somehow she will have some kind of sin in her future? Wow. You see, Jesus was really viewed as being weak on sin. He loved the tax collectors. He ate dinner with them. He had prostitutes washing his feet with their hair. That just does not, that ain't right. If you're from the religious, that ain't right. That is inappropriate. You see, he wasn't working with your rules. He was saving the world. The source of his living was the Father. Here's what it looks like. And here's how he could do this. John 5:19. Jesus gave them this answer. Very truly I tell you, the Son can do nothing by himself. He can do only what he sees the Father doing, because whatever the Father does, the Son also does. Do you hear how powerful that statement is? Do you want to turn over tables? Do you want to flip those tables over the money changers? Do you want to, flex the muscles there a little bit? All you have to do is follow what the Father is doing. He said, I only do what I see him doing. That's what I'm going to do. John 12:47-49. If anyone hears my words but does not accept them, I do not judge that person. That's Jesus speaking. I'm going to speak. If they don't accept my words, I'm not going to judge them. Most of us as parents and as pastors or bosses, we judge everybody who doesn't listen to us. Jesus said, I don't judge them. Why don't you? That's not what I'm here to do. I'm here to draw people. What if drawing people was a greater call? What if we were less concerned with purity of appearance and more concerned with the purity of the call? So he says, I did not speak on my own, but the Father who sent me commanded me to say all that I have spoken. I know that his command leads to eternal life. Do you hear that? What he commanded me to say, I know it will produce eternal life. Do you hear how it ties right to the purpose? Do Do you hear how it goes through the circumstances of the moment? It goes through everything that's happening in the event, and it has a higher peace, a higher calling, a higher conductivity with God that is about people getting all the way to eternity. And I am convinced that the words I speak, because God gave them to me, they will produce eternal life. See, it's not about producing right and wrong. It's not about making somebody line up with a rule. It's not about catching somebody who lied or didn't do something right. It is about being the voice, being the actions that connect people with eternity. So whatever I say is just what the Father has told me to say. That was the source of his living. The source of our living. 1 Thessalonians 5, Christ died for us so that whether we are dead or alive, I like that. It's kind of representing life like it's more fluid than we like to think of it. We think of life, then we think of death, and then we think of dead. You got it? From your side, it would be life, death, dead. You awake? Can you hear that? Repeat that then. Life, death, dead. All right? Do you see how never once in that entire process did the Father relinquish power and control? Do you see why he's not afraid of death? Or dying? Or being dead? It's because he's not. It's just a transition. Christ died for us so that no matter what our state, living or dead or compromised, somewhere in between, whatever you want to call it, it says, so encourage one another with these words. You see, we have a role in one another's lives. We can talk about this idea of connecting in the moment. It's what the Father is doing, listening for the Father. But the truth is, God created us to be a tribe, a herd. We are pack creatures. We need one another. And this is the way that we can grow together. This is what binds us together as a church. I had a chance to speak with Heather's parents last weekend. Had a great time, especially talking to her dad. Her dad used to race motocross. Had a pretty significant background in motocross. I used to race motocross, obviously years ago, a lot of years ago. But you know, it never leaves you. I mean, I can talk about motocross like I was racing yesterday. The same way people can talk about flying, same way people can talk about sports or whatever it is that you have some identity with. And you know, we could probably talk for days about motorcycles and not really repeat. But if we repeated, it wouldn't matter because it would still be good. Because if you tell me one of your flying stories and you tell me 10 times, I'd love to hear it that 10th time. Because it's a flying story. Years ago, Boston College was playing for the national championship, and Doug Flutie, anybody remember Doug Flutie? Yeah. Threw the Hail Mary. Yeah. And was caught in the end zone for a touchdown. They won the game. It was probably one of the best games I've ever seen. You know how many times I've watched that on reruns on YouTube? I never get tired of seeing that. You know, to see something like that, you never get tired of it. I never get tired of being encouraged. Hebrews 10, 23 through 25. Let us hold fast the confession of our hope without wavering, for he who promised is faithful. And let us consider how to stir one another to love and good deeds, not neglecting to meet together, as some are in the habit of doing, but encourage one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near. You see, the church is this. You see, the church is a group of people that believe that our life has been transformed and made different. And the rules have been removed. And we've been given a connection with the Father and an understanding of who he is. And we've been asked by the Father and told by the Father, compelled by the Father, I want you to wrestle with this. I know where you live. I know the constant barrage that's on your life. I get it. Here's what I want you. I want you to struggle through this and learn from me. I want you to connect with me in the moment. And I'm going to put you with a group of people who are also aspiring to do the same thing. And as you're in this reality of where you are, I want you to encourage one another with the truth of where the goal line is. That we are pushing and pulling and encouraging people into eternity. I want you to encourage one another that the moment is not where the prize is. But the prize is what God is delivering into humanity. And we're a part of that story unfolding. Because it's easy in the moment to let go of those things. So God has purposely put us with one another so that we could encourage one another. We could feed off of one another. And that's what this is saying over here in Hebrews. Encourage one another. All the more as you see the day coming. And consider how we can stir one another up to love and good deeds. I don't need to hear new things. I need to hear the things that I need to hear. I need to be encouraged. I need to be challenged. I need to hear the stories again and again. I don't need to hear Bible stories. I need to hear your story. I need to hear my story. When I walk away from spending time with you, I want to relish that I'm better than I was when I got there. That's what I want. That's what I need. That's community. We have to operate beyond ourselves to make that happen. And we have to purpose to be a people that makes that happen. I was working with someone this week, someone that's in this room, and this person has had a setback a couple of years ago with family members and the inheritance that was not fair. And the result of this was a severed relationship between brothers and sisters. That's a fairly common thing, isn't it? When there's a great injustice and that injustice is felt, and it's felt on more than one level. Certainly it's felt on a material level, a financial level, but it's also felt on a level of betrayal. And we struggle to shake betrayal. We struggle to get that off of us. And this person felt like God was challenging them to call and restore that relationship. Even though it's like this. It's like that. Mm-hmm. Would you restore that relationship? Would you swallow betrayal? Would you swallow the injustice? That's what Jesus did. He swallowed injustice. He swallowed betrayal. And he did it for love. He did it for love. To let the guilty go. To bless the guilty. To bless someone who betrays you. It's extraordinary. It's exactly what God looks like. It's exactly what he looks like.
Amen.
And we see it in the scripture, and to see it in a human being is pretty extraordinary. So, a text was sent, I believe, and then going down the road with this person, and I could tell that this person was either having a sinus attack or they were crying. So I asked which one, and I'll give the answer word for word through tears. He misses me. Isn't that great words? Isn't that great words? And then the weight came off of this person. Why? It's still like this. In fact, it's even more like this because you're the one that crossed the line. Do you see how unjust that is? You know how wrong that is? I mean, you're getting it to a place where it's not even fixable. You can't even kill somebody and get this right. But the weight is lifted off. And the power of the injustice loses. Mm-hmm. And humanity wins. Not one, not two, but everybody. As the ripple effect goes out, people win. Eternal life is gained. And the Father and all the heavens shaking their head in approval. That's exactly how the people of God do injustice. Mm-hmm. You know how hard that is? Do you know how hard it is to experience this and cross the line with all your heart? It's impossible. That's what the scripture said. With man, that stuff's impossible. You're just going to be the doormat. That's all you're going to be. You're just going to suck it up and you're going to be the wuss. That's all you're going to be. Can I say that on tape? I just did. I agree with it. That's how we feel if God isn't driving. So the people of God, we encourage one another to live this life. I saw Caesar Milan, the dog whisperer, and he had a couple of dogs, and they're angry and, biting and going nuts and crazy. And so what he does with them, they're growling, and they have other dogs at home, and those dogs are biting the other dogs at home, and they're just out of control. So Caesar gets the dogs, and then he finds the one that is the worst of those two, and then he puts it in with his pack of dogs. And the dog is, angry and growling and showing the teeth and everything. And these other dogs, the tail is wagging, and this dog calms down. And what he wants is what he calls the energy, the calm and the energy of the pack to influence the angry and aggressive. And although this dog is growling and showing the teeth at these dogs, they do not respond with the same thing. They still just wag their tail, their ears are down. They're just responding different, not in kind. You get it? It is not eye for eye. It is not tooth for tooth. It is not growl for growl. It is not, you're puffed up, I can puff up bigger. It's not about who can win a war right here. It's about, I'm not here to fight you. I'm here to love you. And this dog calmed down. And I thought, that's the church. See, the church should be a place where you can bring somebody from the outside. And although they might be aggressive, or angry, or hurt, that they could come in and they could sense and experience something that allows them to calm down. I think we look at the church as it's a place that people go. It's just as unsafe as it is out there. And so it's a hit and miss thing. And so you got angry people in the church, and you got, power players in the church. You got predators in the church. You got every kind of thing in the church. I used to agree with that. I don't agree with that anymore, and I'll tell you why. I've changed my definition of the church. The church is not the building, and it's not all the people that show up on Sunday morning. The church is the people who have decided to follow Jesus in the moment, are connected with the Father, are moving in joy, they're moving in peace, and they are willing and able to experience injustice and thrive in that in the moment every time. They are committed to encouraging one another, loving one another, supporting another in that effort. That's the church. That's what it looks like. And whether there are 3 of us in here, or 10 of us in here, or 20 of us in here, the truth is, whatever that group is, that's the church. That's the pack that will allow others to feel safe and calm. It is a powerful thing to be a part of God's pack. We're given the job of hosting the angry and the hurt, the wounded, the mean, the predator, hosting them. That's what we do. We connect with the Father. You see how the rules would complicate that? 3 strikes, you're out. Don't ask, don't tell. All those things just go out the window. And it's really about loving people to eternity. The people of God. If you want to do this, you'll need to be a part of the pack. You'll need to have people who are encouraging you that Christ died so that we could live this way. We'll need to be encouraging one another and stirring one another up to love and good deeds. 1 Peter 4, 8 through 10. Above all, keep loving one another earnestly, since love covers a multitude of sins. Show hospitality to one another without grumbling. Oh, did you hear that? Show hospitality without grumbling. It continues to hit on this thread, doesn't it? You're going to have to connect with God, and you're going to have to be at a place where grumbling just isn't on your personal menu. Do you realize how many of us would have no life at all if we couldn't complain and grumble? We have hands going up. But we can do a different life. That's what the gospel says. That's old. That's the old life. That's done. The new life is different. It's way different. And it's not about rules. Show hospitality to one another without grumbling. As each has received gifts, use it to serve one another as good stewards of God's varied grace. So we keep company together. We encourage one another. We love one another. We enjoy hospitality to one another. We remind one another. The next one is, we replace corrupting talk with building up talk. Ephesians 4:29, let no corrupting talk come out of your mouths. That would silence most of us. But only such as is good for building up, as it fits the occasion, that it may give grace to those who hear. So, not too long ago, I was part of a dinner get-together. It was all believers except maybe one. And we talked about the injustices. And we talked about bad Christians. And we talked about a lot of things. But we did not encourage one another. We did not build one another up. We did not remind one another of the successes of the gospel and what that does for us. I was there. I was talking about me. And when I left, I remember thinking, I am not better for having come. And it reminded me of all the home groups I've gone to through the years. Where before a home group, you get there a little early, you talk about sports, you talk about your car insurance went up, you talk about your boss is a jerk, you talk about how much overtime you have to work and they're ripping you off, and you talk about all these things, and all this stuff goes on. And then whoever the person is that's on call that night, the teacher or the host or something, they're like the, spiritual police. And they say, okay, we got to stop and round up. We got to talk about Jesus. So you come over, you sit down, get a book or something like that, and you talk about Jesus for 45 minutes or so. Then after that, it's kind of officially over. We go right back to talking about other things. It was like there was this Jesus intermission in our life. Now, if you're a rule person, you might be thinking, well, does that mean we can only talk about Jesus? Is that the only thing we can talk about? I would say, no, I don't think that would be a good rule. If we had a rule, that probably wouldn't be the rule I would have. Probably, I would say, did we find a way in the circumstances of the people in the room to encourage them? Were we encouraged? Did we build one another up in the faith? Did I put you in a better place for joy and for peace for your life? Did I do that to you, for you? Or did I compare miseries with you? Because I'm sure mine are greater miseries than yours. What if we had a home group where we encouraged one another in the faith, and we told stories that encouraged and built one another up, and we didn't focus on everything that's wrong, but we focused on everything that's right. And for us to think that there's not very much right to talk about is to truly have lost our connection with God in eternity. And if that's my situation, I beg you, speak to me about the good things of God. My moment needs you to speak to me. Encourage me. Take seriously the work of change. 1 Corinthians 10. We talked about corrupting talk. Now I want to talk about how it's kind of in spiritual things. We demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God. And when I say we demolish arguments and every pretension, I'm not talking about that you demolish mine and I demolish yours. This is not code for, now here we get to argue. We can argue about faith. There it is. Those arguments are in my mind. They're in my heart. My battles, my real spiritual battles, are not in this room. My spiritual battles are here. And those are the only ones that I really have the power to demolish, aren't they? I can't demolish something for you. We demolish the arguments and every pretension. that sets itself up against the knowledge of God, and we take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ. As a people, that's what we do. That's what our pact does. That's one of the things we do. We encourage one another. We remind one another. We enjoy hospitality together. We build one another up. And, oh, by the way, we're also a people that demolishes the arguments that come up in our own soul. They come up against the truth of God. Wow, we are out of time. So we're going to stop right there. There's more things we can do. Stay tuned. I let somebody down this week who was in this room. This person was very gracious to me today. They ignored the injustice for me. Isn't that great? If you would stand.